Thank you for joining Financial Aid for Immigrant Families. This is our second webinar on the topic, and we plan to make it a regular occurrence based on the feedback that we have been hearing from y'all. So my name is May Whiting, and I am the Data and Research Manager at Alabama Possible. We are so excited to be joined by our wonderful partners at the Hispanic Interest Coalition of Alabama and the Utah Higher Education Assistance Authority. Just to give y'all an idea of the goal for this webinar, it's not only our goal to provide you with information on financial aid and how to complete the FAFSA, but our goal is also to provide you with ways of supporting your students who are not US citizens. So we'll talk about ways of signaling to your students that you are someone who really cares about their post-secondary dreams. And so we'd like to recognize and thank our sponsors and partners for supporting this work and for making this webinar possible. A few housekeeping notes before we get started. Please keep your microphones on mute at all times, just so we can avoid any feedback during the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and posted to youtube.com/Alabama Possible. And throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature. We're going to save all of those questions for a Q&A session towards the end of the presentation. As always, please share your commitment to building a college-going culture on social media. You can find us at AL Goes to College on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And please use the following hashtags so that we can see all of your work and really learn from each other as a community. We encourage you to use hashtag FAFSA and hashtag Cash for College when posting about topics around financial aid and affording college. So this webinar is part of the 2020-2021 Alabama Goes to College campaign, which is a statewide campaign that provides tools and relationships every student can pursue and complete valuable secondary credentials. So today we're really going to focus on the Cash for College component as we discuss post-secondary financial aid opportunities for immigrant families. And you can find more information about the campaign as a whole by visiting alabamagoestocollege.org. And I would now like to introduce Estella from HICA.
Hi, good morning. My name is Estella Tirado, and I'm Program Manager at HICA for the Empowering Communities. My program houses the education work we do here at HICA, and I'm very happy to be here with you guys. So I wanted to go over some key terms and definitions with you that we'll be discussing and you guys are going to be hearing in the presentation. First of all, I would like to make the notation that we prefer not to use the term illegal immigrant, since it implies criminality, it dehumanizes, and it labels the individual and not opposed to the action. Like, for example, I've never heard a person that when they get a ticket, they're considered an illegal driver. So just to make sure that we are considerate of that term and when we talk to our students. So immigrant refers to people residing in the United States who were not US citizens at birth. This means lawful permanent residents. This means refugees, asylees, kids with DACA, just persons that are non-US citizens. An undocumented individual is a person who entered the US legally and immigration status has expired, or entered the US without authorization. A DACA recipient is a person who has been granted protection under Deferred Action of Childhood Arrivals. Usually these kids are now young adults, some of them arrived before 2007. And a dreamer is a documented student or an undocumented youth. and persons who arrived as children or youth to US and have not been able to find some path to naturalization. If you guys have any questions regarding this, you can put them in the chat box or follow up with me later.
Awesome. Thank you so much for setting the stage with those terms and definitions. So I would now like to introduce Dylan Cafferty with UHIA.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dylan Cafferty. I am the Community Outreach Specialist for the Utah Higher Education Assistance Authority. So I am located in Utah. Mainly, we're here to help assist our students with completing the FAFSA, finding ways to pay for college, and scholarship support. So I'm very excited to be here with everyone. I'm going to cover a little bit about DACA. DACA stands for the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. I'll do a brief background history of what's going on, and then what's updated since, or what's the updates that have recently come to pass. So a quick background, DACA was an executive order under the Obama administration back in 2012. It's for immigrant youth who came to the US as children. And the word youth there is kind of counterintuitive in that these youth could, at this point, even be in the age of their mid-30s. So the DACA gives temporary protection from deportation, and it gives them a work permit for up to 2 years with the potential for renewal. So it gives them this protection in the country. So what kind of happened with the Trump administration? So fast forward up to 2017, the Trump administration announced that it was going to end DACA. That means no new requests, and it phased out for current recipients who had DACA. Of course, this went to the courts, and so they had a preliminary injunction that they decided that it effectively requires that the Trump administration continue to process renewal requests for the DACA recipients. However, they still did not require to process applications for any new recipients. And then in November of 2019, the Supreme Court had some hearings for 3 consolidant cases pertaining to DACA. And there was kind of a pause there during the decision time for that. And then fast forward, if you want to go to that next slide. Fast forward to August 2020, just recently, UScis Guidance was granted and gave DACA some more guidelines to kind of their boundaries with it. And one of the big ones was DACA would be limited to 1 year instead of 2. And those that did have the 2-year grants remain valid during that time as well. I've kind of given this slide more as like a reference for you all. And so because mainly a lot of this is no longer in place, just because things have been updated since. So next slide, please. So the courts then did update DACA in December recently, and even up until Biden's memo on the 20th of January this month. And pretty much DACA has been reinstated to its initial form. So all Trump administration changes have been canceled. So this means that the DACA program is now open to first-time applicants. It's also open to renewal requests and advanced parole requests as well. And advanced parole, just so you have an idea of what that is, normally if a student who has DACA leaves the country for example, like a study abroad, visiting family, humanitarian actions, etc., and if they wanted to come back without advanced parole, they would not be able to return to the country. So advanced parole gives them the opportunity to be able to leave the country and come back for the different reasons that they have. So, and there are specifics to that you can explore, and I've got a link there down below. In addition, the 2-year of protection has been returned. So those that were approved for 1 year of protection are now automatically extended back to 2 years. And then all applications that were rejected during the Wolf memo can now be resubmitted for a first-time DACA application. So in all, this is great for our students to help them be able to have that protection under the DACA.
Awesome. Thank you, Dylan. So we're going to talk about how DACA and that status relates to financial aid eligibility. So having these policy updates really lets us understand what the current state of DACA is and how that might impact students' financial aid eligibility. So now we're going to dive into general financial aid eligibility for immigrant families and how they go about completing the FAFSA. So this portion of the presentation will be a general overview of eligibility, and later in the presentation, we'll talk more specifically about college options and financial aid opportunities for students in Alabama. So again, this is just going to be more of the general overview. So many non-US citizens qualify for federal student aid, and students shouldn't assume that they can't get aid just because they're not a citizen. So in terms of which US students qualify for federal aid, that includes US nationals, so includes natives of American Samoa or Swains Island. It also includes US permanent residents with a green card, people with an I-94, so this includes refugees, asylees, Cuban Haitian entrants, and conditional entrants, as well as parolees. People with a T visa, so these are victims of human trafficking. People with protection under the Violence Against Women Act, and citizens of the Republic of Palau, federal states of Micronesia, and the Republic of the Marshall Islands. So these are all non-US citizens who do qualify for federal aid. Now, which non-US citizens do not qualify for federal aid? So these are our undocumented students. So like Estella said, this includes a person who entered the US without authorization, or a person who entered the US legally and their immigration status has then expired. And then documented students, or students who have been granted DACA, do not qualify for federal aid. And I want to note here that while students with DACA aren't eligible for federal financial aid, those who have a social security number might still complete the FAFSA, and we'll talk more about that in just a moment. So if a student isn't eligible for federal aid, so again, here we're largely talking about undocumented students and students with DACA, what other options do they have? In that instance, students may be eligible for state or institutional aid in addition to private scholarships, and it's really going to depend on the state and or the institution where the student is applying. So you might have students who are applying within Alabama, but you also might have students who are applying out of state across the country. So it's all dependent on the state or institution where they're applying. And then more practically, how do non-citizen students complete the FAFSA? So certain non-citizen students will need to provide an A number, or an alien registration number, and that there will be an opportunity to put that in on the FAFSA. And students will need a social security number to complete the application. So when we think of a social security number being a requirement, we know that's going to exclude our undocumented students. But documented students, or students who've been granted DACA, might have a social security number, in which case they might still complete the FAFSA even if they do not qualify for federal aid. And this is because by completing the FAFSA, they're able to determine their eligibility for state and institutional aid for those states that actually use the FAFSA to determine eligibility for state and institutional aid. So just to reiterate, students with DACA who have a social security number can complete the FAFSA even if they don't qualify for federal aid. And while completing the FAFSA, they have to answer the question, are you a US citizen? And they should respond to that question with, no, I am not a citizen or eligible non-citizen. So then how do students with non-citizen parents or guardians complete the FAFSA? And as a reminder, only the student's aid eligibility matters when completing the FAFSA. So the application actually does not ask about a parent's or guardian's citizenship status. In this case, if a parent or guardian does not have a social security number, they will enter all zeros where it asks for the social security number. And because they don't have a social security number, they're unable to create the FSA ID that serves as a login for the FAFSA. It also serves as an electronic signature for the FAFSA. And so because they can't create an FSA ID, they also won't be able to sign the FAFSA form electronically. So because of that, they'll print out the signature page, they'll sign it, and then they'll mail it to the address indicated. So just to recap here, this could apply to different kinds of students. You could have a student who is a citizen with non-citizen parents, and you can also have a student who is not a citizen with non-citizen parents. But in terms of how the parent or guardian is impacting the FAFSA, their citizenship doesn't matter. The thing that is a bit of a hurdle is the fact that they don't have a social security number. And so we have to enter those zeros and then print and mail the signature page. So I will now turn it back over to Estella to discuss specific options for students in Alabama.
Thank you, May. Okay, so this is a deep breath usually. So who can attend college in Alabama? And this is a conversation I've been having with students during this week. Students with authorization to be in the US and have a social security number are allowed to enroll in Alabama public colleges and universities. Like we said, this can mean lawful permanent residents, those with refugee status, asylees, those that maybe are protected under VAWA, certain humanitarian visas. Unfortunately, undocumented students without a status are not allowed to enroll in public colleges or universities. And we maybe see this, and those that are right now counselors at high schools have seen maybe a recent influx of recent arrivals of students that are maybe 16 or 17 that do not qualify for DACA. And there are plenty of those in our schools right now. But they can enroll into private universities at the discretion of the university's admissions office. It's important to say that each university is going to have their own requirement and process. So it's important for them to, even though they're maybe in 10th or 11th grade, to start looking at those processes right now. And unfortunately, these challenges are a result of HB 56, which is an anti-immigrant law that was passed in 2011 that does not allow undocumented students to enroll to public universities, not receive state financial aid. It also limits authorities to extend even driver's license and professional licenses to youth or those persons that do not have any documented status here in the US. Next slide, please. So how to pay for college when undocumented? So undocumented students, including documented students, are not eligible for federal or state funded aid here in Alabama. Some public universities may have financial resources available for documented students. Students should inquire directly with financial services or admissions about these resources, since these are not often publicized. Sometimes maybe they have some donors that may give money, may give certain in-kind donations to help out these students. Next slide, please. Undocumented students with no status who plan to attend a private institution in the state should be eligible for private financial aid that the school offers. Again, this is at discretion of the institution. They should consult directly with the admissions counselor and with the financial aid offices at the school there's a large number of scholarships for undocumented students at a national level, and there are very few within the state of Alabama. We have a list, and at the end, we're going to name those resources. HICA and Fiesta are examples of small scholarships. We actually have our scholarship process open right now. It's a small from $1,000 to $2,000 scholarship that we give. And the immigration status for the students does not matter. And in our webpage, students can consult the requirements for that. And like I said, college options for undocumented students, private universities, examples are Birmingham Southern College, Sanford, Spring Hill College. The admissions can be different according to the institution. I know that Birmingham Southern College has set up policies welcoming any student who graduated from the U.S. regardless of their status, and I highly recommend counselors and students to consult with the authorities at Birmingham Southern College to see if that is still going on.
Awesome, thank you so much. We are now going to put some of what we learned into practice. So some of that aid eligibility, Dylan is going to lead us through some scenarios.
Of course. And just a forewarning beforehand, all these names that I have are not real people. This is all made up. So, but this should be good. And starting out with our first situation, Michaela. So Michaela was born in the US and has a social security number. She is considered a dependent, excuse me, a dependent student on her parents for the purposes of the FAFSA. And her parents do not have social security numbers. Only Michaela's father works, and her parents didn't file taxes for 2019. So how would we best be able to assist Michaela? In this situation, since the student is a citizen, they do qualify for federal financial aid, and they can file the FAFSA. When it comes to the process of completing the FAFSA, first Michaela will need to complete a FSA ID, which she can. And one parent would need to do so unless they don't have a social security number. So her parents cannot do that because they do not have social security numbers. And I'll talk about that in just a second of what that really pertains to. On the FAFSA, the parents, it will ask on the FAFSA for their social security number. And what the parents can do is put all zeros for their social. So they still can do that and move forward with it. And then when it comes to the portion when it's talking about their tax information, because we stated that Michaela's family did not file taxes for the 2019 year, they will put will not file on the FAFSA. And then from there, they'll just fill out their financial information to the best of their ability. When signing the FAFSA, this is where that FSA ID comes into play. The FSA ID is their digital signature for the FAFSA. So since the parents don't have one, when they're going to the part where they're going to sign the FAFSA, what they'll do is they'll print out the signature page, they'll sign it, and then they'll mail in their signature. And when they do mail the signature, it usually takes about 5 to 10 weeks to get processed. When compared to if, for example, the parents did have socials and were able to complete the FSA ID and submitted the FAFSA, it usually takes about 3 to 5 days. So you can kind of see the difference there. So just be aware that, if there are deadlines, et cetera, that the student is talking to the schools beforehand while that signature is getting processed. And another thing to kind of bring up, not a lot of parents may be comfortable providing their information to the federal government when they're, undocumented. And so just be aware of that. Something that I always tell my students in this situation is, it's definitely up to you in the end. The Department of Education, they say that they do not share any of the information that they receive on the FAFSA with immigration enforcement entities. And so they claim that it's a safe place to put that information. And through my experience and with my team's experience, we've never encountered any problems with it, but do be aware of that when assisting the students in those situations that, it's up to them finally to put that information on there. Okay. Okay, situation number 2, this is Jalen. Jalen and his family came to the US when he was about 8. He currently has DACA. Jalen is considered a dependent student for the FAFSA purposes, and his parents do not have, nor does he have a social security number. Both of his parents work, and they really wish that Jalen was able to go to college to be able to get an education. So what type of aid can Jalen receive in his situation? As a DACA recipient, Jalen does not qualify for federal aid. So he can't file the FAFSA without a social security number. And in this particular situation, he does not have that. So what type of aid can he receive? Like stated before, private scholarships are always an option. They have them on a national level, state level, and institutional level. So be aware of those different scholarships and the resources to be able to find those. And they're going to be different for your different areas, et cetera. Also be aware that some private scholarships may require like the proof of citizenship or maybe the FAFSA to be completed. And so that those students will not be able to apply to those scholarships just because they can't fully complete the application. These are some tips, some great tips to be able to assist you moving forward with helping these students in these situations. Stay up to date with state and federal policy. That's so huge. Utah is very different in what we kind of have with our policy compared to Alabama. An example of ours is that in Utah, if a student attends 3 years of high school and graduates from a Utah high school, so 3 years of a Utah high school and graduates from Utah high school, they may qualify for in-state tuition, and that's because of our House Bill 134. And so stay up to date to these different policies that are going on, DACA policies. It's good to know what's happening just so you know how to best assist the students. Also, we recommend to get them connected with resources and organizations who can help them, like HICA, of course. And here in Utah, some of our colleges have dream centers that are specifically made to assist students in all these different types of situations. And we also have other organizations available to support our students here in Utah, and I'll actually list those later on. Moving forward, Manuel and his mother were granted asylum last year when they came to the US. Manuel is considered a dependent student for the purposes of the FAFSA, of course. Manuel and his mother have I-94s, along with work visas. They have alien registration numbers, or A numbers, and social security numbers. And currently, both Manuel and his mother work. So does Manuel qualify for aid? Next slide, please. So Manuel is considered an asylee student. He's been granted asylum, and so he does qualify for financial aid. When he does file the FAFSA, and May discussed this earlier, he will need both his A number and his social security number. He'll mainly need the social security number when he's filling out the FSA ID and at the beginning, possibly at the beginning of the FAFSA. When it comes to the mother's information, they will just need her social security number. And when it comes to taxes, this situation is a little bit in a gray area, so it depends on the situation of the family and what they've completed. But if they complete taxes here in the US, or if they completed taxes in the country of their origin, there's a different process for each. If the parent filed taxes in their country of origin, then there's an option on the FAFSA for a foreign tax returns. It would be where they would say what type of taxes did you file. Usually you'd have a student put like a 1040 form, and on that list there's a foreign tax return. And when filling that out, just be aware that any money that is on there, they need to convert the currency that they had from their country of origin to US dollars to be able to insert that on the FAFSA, and just to fill out the financials to the best of their ability when it comes to that. And the other situations, if they file taxes here in the US, it's a normal process that way. And then when it comes to if they did not file taxes, then they would need to will not file, and then fill out as much information as they can to the best of their ability. That may limit their financial aid eligibility for different degrees. So just be aware of that as well. Okay, situation number 4, Mary. Mary was born in the US and has a social. Her parents were undocumented, but then they got deported. So now Mary lives with her aunts, and she has no contact with her parents and has had no contact with her parents for the past 2 years. So how can we help Mary? I specifically didn't put the dependency situation on this part. So to the next slide. So Mary is a citizen, so she does qualify for federal financial aid. When filing a FAFSA, in this situation, she is not considered independent. And this is mainly because she still is dependent on her parents, even though they are in another country. However, she doesn't have any contact with her parents. So we're in a weird gray area that may come up if you ever encounter this with a student. What you'll do in this situation, and similar situations I'll bring up as well, as maybe the parents were incarcerated, and another one is, maybe there's abuse or something happening in the family, and Mary doesn't really want to contact parents whatsoever because it's kind of dangerous for her. If those are some different scenarios that kind of fall into place with this. So what she can do is put, I am unable to provide information about my parents. From there, it's going to give her some warnings on the FAFSA when completing that about, you may not qualify for aid, et cetera, and some different warnings there. But after that, it's going to give her 3 options. It's going to say, I will provide information about my parents. The next one will be, I have listed here, I have a special circumstance and I am unable to provide information about my parents. And the last one will say, I just refuse to provide information about my parents. In this case, if she selects, I have a special circumstance, it'll skip over the parents' information and have her just fill out her financial information. And then she will just need to follow up with the financial aid office at the college she plans to attend for professional judgment. From there, the school is going to decide what type of eligibility aid or aid eligibility she will have. And so it's good to know, make sure that the student is aware that they need to talk to that financial aid office at the college. And I put links to dependency as well as who is the FAFSA parent below on these slides. When you're looking at them later, you can see those.
Yeah, I wanted to say Dylan did an excellent job leading us through these scenarios, and the links will be an incredible resource for you to turn to as you're working with specific situations that your students have. So anytime that you have a specific situation, we recommend, since there are so many different factors that can be playing into it, to always revisit the guidance directly from federal student aid, which is what we have linked here. Take into account all of the factors that are influencing the situation. That's your best bet. But thank you so much, Dylan, for leading us through those. And now we have some more tips.
Yeah, more tips. Also, if you ever run into a situation where you're like, I have no idea how to help the student, I don't know who to contact, etc. One thing that I always do is reach out to the FSA. They have a live chat online that you can just message with one of the professionals there, and they can give you answers, or you can call. I just type in, like, for example, on Google, I just type FSA chat, and usually it's like the first thing that'll pop up. And so you can get contact with them with, specific situations that maybe were not covered in this presentation. Moving forward, here's some quick tips when it just comes to talking to students and parents, mainly because, you want to be aware and you want to be able to help them. The first one is be mindful, be understanding, know what's happening. Not everyone's going to be comfortable talking about their citizenship status. So don't directly ask the student or parent about their citizenship status. Let them kind of bring it up if they're willing to. We don't want to push that because that can be something that's really uncomfortable. And be prepared. This is huge. Knowing the policy, being aware of what situations these families may be in, and knowing how to help them really opens the door to make them feel more comfortable talking to you about it. And I know, not directly asking can bring up some barriers if you're kind of unsure about different situations. And so one thing to kind of, make a solution to that is make your conversation more universal. An example of this could be, not the best way to do it would be, let's say we're talking about the FSA and you're introducing kind of the FAFSA and everything to the student. And you say, hey, one student or the student you and at least one parent needs to create an FSA ID so that you can sign the FAFSA at the end. In that case, you've stopped there. I recommend adding, the extra portion about possibly the different situations that these families could be in. So for example, say this, unless the parent does not have a social security number, then they would need to print, sign, and mail the signature page at the end of the FAFSA. doing that opens so many doors to be able to have them, understand. I do this with every single thing, every time I talk to a student, just so I have, the situation available for them and they can answer how they wish. A lot of students will be like, oh yeah, my parents have socials, we're good. Others will be like, oh, my parent doesn't have a social security number. You inform me more about this, etc. Or maybe it'll just be quiet and they won't say anything. But at least you've given them the information about what they need to do. Moving on, make sure that the students and parents know that you are a safe resource. Having something like that kind of signifies, that you're a safe resource in your office, put up on the wall or something might be a good idea. One thing that I did when I was working in the schools was I put up the dreamer's butterfly, and I have the little picture up there above. Maybe having that in your office would be a good thing. Just if they are aware of, that symbol, then they kind of know that you're a safe resource. But doing it in a way that's, a little bit subtle. So just be aware of our students and be mindful of their situations the best way so you can be able to help them.
Like Dylan said, I mean, be mindful of their situations. There might be some students that it will take 2 or 3 sessions for them to tell you their situation, or little by little, you'll be putting clues together. They'll say, oh, it's because I don't qualify, or I got here, I wasn't born in the US. So you have to start like putting the puzzle together. And it's just making sure that you have an open door policy for them and making sure that they are aware. And it's totally valid to say, I don't know, and I'm going to consult with someone else. I know that a lot of you are like the soundboard for our kids, and I really appreciate that. But just be mindful that there are organizations like us that we can help you. And I also tell them, I may not have the solution. I may not have the answer you need immediately, but I will refer you to someone else. It's kind of a chain of events that they have to do. And yeah, I mean, like I said, it's just make them feel in a safe space, but always be honest of their situation. Sometimes we want to harbor them and we don't want to hurt them with the truth, but sometimes it's better for them to start knowing from now what they're going to be confronting out there so they can be prepared and start planning.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. So we're going to cover different resources, whether they're websites or social media pages that you can consult. And I will let Dylan take this slide.
Yes, so some of our resources. First off, we have some partners that we kind of connect our students to. Over on the side here, I've got their different logos. 2 of them that are big is our Dream Centers at our Salt Lake Community College and our University of Utah. We have a lot of connection with Latinos in Action. We do presentations with the students that are in Latinos in Action. We've got the University Neighborhood Partners, Communities United or Comunidades Unidas. They're a great resource that we have to assist our students, their center students too. And then the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs. I've got some links here and I've added different links to this. So if you do have the presentation downloaded, you can click on it and add it and see where these links take you. But our completefinancialaid.org, it has a lot of great resources. I have in these bulletins some of the different ones on there. We have a Paying for College guide. It's mainly directed for Utah students, but still useful everywhere else. We have that in English and Spanish. We have our FAFSA do-it-yourself kit, and that's also in English and Spanish. And so that's available to help students kind of follow along or kind of see those big questions that they may run into. A huge one that we definitely recommend for you all to use, feel free to use it as you wish, is our YouTube FAFSA walkthrough video. We have this in English and in Spanish on YouTube, and that's under our Complete Financial Aid channel. And so it's a super great resource. It starts from the beginning with the FSA ID clear until the signature page. And then in addition, we have some other resources. Our CompleteScholarships.org has a lot of local scholarships for our Utah students. EducateUtah.org has a lot of information about what the policies are with Utah and kind of what's happening there. And then please follow us on Instagram or Twitter. I post a lot of different information when it comes to FAFSA tips on our Complete Financial Aid Twitter and Instagram, as well as Paying for College tips. And then our Complete Scholarships is mainly focused for Utah, but you can find scholarships available on there. Those are our resources.
Like I mentioned earlier, there's Immigrants Rising. They publish this yearly scholarship list. The list is about 100 pages long because it publishes everything that is available in the whole entire country. Us as HICA, we have our scholarship that is open right now. And my program, we regularly do chats with students. We can go to the high school and speak with classes of 11th or 12th graders. We speak also with parents about what is the education system in the US? How do I get my kids to college? So feel free, you guys can contact me regarding that. In October, we do our FAFSA nights, which is we host FAFSA. We do FAFSA appointments for parents that maybe are undocumented and do not know how to fill out FAFSA. Last fall, we helped about 45 families, even with the pandemic. And we sit with them, we do the whole profile, the account from A to Z. And usually we start promoting that in September so people can reserve their slots. And we do direct services if kids have questions regarding where to look at for information to college, they don't know what to do. We have staff that can help them, a small staff, but we're here. The Taco Bell Foundation is a good resource. They have scholarships available. Unidos US is this national organization that champions for immigrant and Hispanic rights. They have also great information, not only in the education level, but also workforce development and economics. And you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram under hica.alabama. And we're posting there not only information from my program, but all the programs here at HICA.
Great. And we have been getting a lot of questions about what would be the best way to get in touch with HICA. So before you hop off, I just want to make sure that we get that. If you want to share it in the chat, who should be contacted. And I will go on to cover some of the resources from Alabama Possible. So just so y'all know, we will definitely send you these slides so that you have all of the links available in the slides. And we're also going to make a recording of the webinar available on our YouTube channel. But in addition to that, we have a blog post on our website that gets everything in one place. So we have resources for FAFSA in Spanish. We have aid eligibility explanations similar to what we went through in today's webinar. And then we also have a bulleted list of scholarship resources. So one that I wanted to mention is the Get Schooled scholarship list. As you can see in the screenshot, I have over 50 scholarships for students either undocumented or who have. So just another resource. We'll continue adding to that blog post so that it has the most updated information. And as we find more resources, we'll make sure they're available to you. So I will now turn it over to Keela Lawrence to facilitate Q&A.
Thank you, May. So we're going to hop right into the questions. Anyone in the audience, if you have any questions, feel free to send them now so we can get them answered. So you all already answered the first question. People were asking how to contact you all. So if you missed it, they both dropped their phone number and their emails in the chat box. So for the next question, do you all know of any programs or literature that might help 9th or 11th or 9th through 11th grade students to become citizens before they become seniors, so it's not an issue their entire senior year?
I can answer that question. So becoming US citizens is not that simple. Usually they have to go through a process where they have maybe a lawful permanent resident or a US citizen as a qualifying relative that can petition them. I recommend that students or their parents, if they have a question, if they qualify for an immigration benefit, they should contact an attorney immigration attorney, or they can contact here at HICA. We have an immigration service program that can screen them for free. We have 3 accredited representatives from the Department of Justice that can practice immigration law just like an attorney. And they can save themselves maybe $200 instead of going with an attorney for an appointment. They can just call and they can be screened. I only ask for patience because of DACA. We are flooded with calls and we do have a wait list of 150 persons to get back to them. So that is, I think, the most honest answer I can give you regarding that.
Thank you. So the next question is, what are some resources that educators can refer their students to, Hispanic students, if they're not comfortable speaking with them?
They can call us here at HICA, or like there's the resources we listed. A lot of them should have people or representatives that speak Spanish. I usually receive emails from seniors, from students, from parents, and I try to resolve their questions as best of my ability. Sometimes that is telling them the truth that maybe they don't qualify for enrolling here in college, and that is also opening their perspective of them or their families, that maybe they have to send their kids somewhere else, or sometimes I just have to refer them to other institutions. So they can call me here at HICA, or they can consult any other institution that maybe was listed in the resource list. Dylan, May, I don't know if you have any other input.
I was just gonna say, just maybe some of the resources I put earlier, maybe they may have more information that comes to the item.
Yeah, we will flood you with resources at the end of this webinar. So be on the lookout for a follow-up email with all of that.
Perfect. Well, those are all the questions that I have. If you'll go to the next slide. So we just want to say, on behalf of Alabama Possible, thank you so much for taking the time out to learn more about supporting your students. And thank you again, and have a great day.